They tell us these are bridges, triumphs of the Industrial Revolution, built for horse and cart. But this is a cover narrative. We are looking at cathedrals of steel and granite, designed with a complexity that mocks their supposed purpose. These structures were never mere passages over water. They were aqueducts of energy that used the water. They are power plants masquerading as infrastructure. The cognitive dissonance is deafening, isn't it? If you've always felt this static in the timeline, this deep sense that the math just doesn't add up, let us know from where and at what hour you are joining this investigation. We are told to look, but we are not trained to see. Let us now commit the radical act of seeing. Let us examine the crime scene. Before you are not drawings, not artistic renderings, but photographs. Frozen moments in time, captured on silver plates, that serve as silent, irrefutable witnesses. Look first at the structure itself, a cathedral of steel and granite, thrown across the water with an arrogance that borders on the divine. Observe the perfectly dressed stone of the towers, each block a megalith, set with a precision that modern laser-guided equipment would struggle to replicate. Gaze upon the impossibly intricate lattice of steel, not crude, hammered iron, but refined, tensile steel, woven into a symphony of structural integrity. It possesses the same DNA. Now, we leap across the entire globe to the other side of the planet. We are in Indooroopilly, Australia, looking at the Albert Bridge, built in 1876. Again, the same intricate latticework, the same engineering signature, the same impossible scale emerging from a colonial outpost that was, by all official accounts, little more than a provincial backwater. France, Portugal, America, Australia, the United Kingdom's fourth bridge, the Sukkur Bridge in modern-day Pakistan. The list goes on, a ghostly litany of identical technological fingerprints appearing simultaneously in every corner of a world supposedly disconnected by vast oceans and primitive communication. This is not parallel thinking. This is not the coincidental invention of competing nations. That is a statistical and logical absurdity. This is a standardized model. A pre-existing, globally deployed technology. We are not looking at the birth of multiple national industrial revolutions. We are looking at the scattered, surviving fragments of a single, unified global civilization. The civilization they call Tartaria. A civilization whose network of infrastructure was so total, so all-encompassing, that its remnants still define the landscapes of the very nations that were built upon its grave. And where did these grand arteries of metal and stone lead? What was their immediate purpose in the post-reset world? These are not mere bridges. They are monuments to a forgotten science, a form of resonant engineering that treated gravity not as an opponent, but as a partner. Now I want you to lower your gaze. Look at the supposed creators. Look at the traffic for which this magnificent artery was allegedly built. You see men in tattered clothing, their faces smudged with the grime of a world lit by gas and powered by muscle. You see emaciated horses, struggling to pull rickety wooden carts that would buckle under the weight of a single one of those granite blocks. This is the central, screaming anomaly, a 21st century infrastructure populated by a 17th century society. The cognitive dissonance is deafening. It is a logistical paradox that no official history book has ever dared to address. The scale of the tool does not match the hand of the alleged user. Look closely at the photograph. Your own eyes are the most reliable instrument you have. If you, too, feel the profound imbalance in this image, a technology out of time serving a people left behind, then acknowledge this truth with a like, so this evidence can break through the walls of the official narrative. Now, let our forensic examination go deeper. Let us direct our gaze downward, below the deck, to where the story truly begins, and where the official narrative crumbles into dust. The official narrative provides a clue, hiding the truth in plain sight. They were the vital conduits to the great World's Fairs and international expositions of the late 19th century. Chicago, Paris, St. Louis, Philadelphia. We are told these were temporary wonderlands, built to celebrate the progress of the new age. But this is another inversion of the truth. The bridges were not built for the fairs. The fairs were staged in the surviving nodal points of the old world's energy and transport grid, a grid to which these bridges belonged. Think of it, colossal palaces of staff and plaster, illuminated by hundreds of thousands of electric lights in an age of gas lamps, filled with technology that would not be reinvented for decades to come. These ephemeral white cities were the showrooms of the previous civilization's technology. It was Antiquitech, put on one last display before being systematically erased. The fairs were a grand fire sale, a final exhibition of the old world's power before the curtains of the new, diminished age were drawn for good. And when the show was over, the evidence was demolished. The magnificent palaces and halls, too grand to explain away, were torn down under the absurd pretext that they were temporary. But the infrastructure, the bridges, the train stations, the foundational grid, was too massive, too essential, too deeply embedded in the earth to be easily destroyed. Look at the pylons, the massive stone legs upon which these titans stand. In modern engineering, a structure of this magnitude would require colossal, flared footings, vast concrete foundations spreading out for acres beneath the soil to distribute the immense load. What do we see here? We see pillars that plunge directly into the earth or into the water with an impossible abruptness. They look amputated. They are severed from their true origins. The official explanation is a lie of omission. We are not seeing the foundations. We are seeing the tops of towers buried by a cataclysm. We are looking at the peaks of a submerged mountain range of technology, drowned in an ocean of mud and silt. The evidence is carved into the stone itself. Look for the water lines, the ancient scars of a different world, stained dozens, sometimes hundreds of feet above the current river level. They tell a silent story of a deluge, a mud flood that reset the very ground beneath our feet. And look closer still at the points of contact. See the crude, brutish patches of modern concrete smeared over the original, perfect stonework. It is the signature of a lesser culture, a cargo cult, attempting to repair inherited technology it cannot comprehend. It is the equivalent of a barbarian trying to fix an integrated circuit with clay. So it was not destroyed. It was assimilated. It was given a new, fabricated history. It was rebranded. This global pattern, this shared architectural signature, is the ultimate anomaly for the control matrix. The matrix relies on division. It needs the illusion of separate histories, of competing cultures, of organic national growth. It needs us to believe we are French or American or Australian, defined by our recent fabricated pasts. But these bridges mock their borders. They are monolithic, silent witnesses that stand astride rivers and gorges, testifying to a time when humanity was connected by a single high technology. They are the undeniable evidence of a unified world that was intentionally shattered and partitioned. The creation of our modern nations was not an evolution. It was an act of fragmentation, a deliberate breaking apart of a global inheritance to ensure that we, the inheritors, would never understand the true scale of what we had lost. We were made to squabble over the fragments of a kingdom, convinced each piece was our own unique creation. This is why this investigation is so crucial. It transcends mere curiosity about old bridges. It is an act of reclamation. We are reassembling the map of a forgotten world, and by extension, the map of our own true identity. This is not construction, it is desecration. It is the evidence of survivors patching up a world they did not build. What we are witnessing is not the birth of the Industrial Revolution. We are witnessing the aftermath. We are the squatters, living in the ruins of a palace, convinced we built it ourselves with sticks and mud. These bridges are the silent bones of a slain giant, and we have been taught to call them our own creations. And so, we arrive at the heart of the illusion. The story, they tell us in school books, the one recited by tour guides, with practiced, hollow reverence. It's the chapter we are taught to admire, not to question. A tale of heroic men with grit, vision, and rudimentary tools, who somehow, against all odds, wrestled titans of steel and stone into existence. This is the official narrative. And it is, by any rational measure, the most fragile part of the entire construct. It is a fairy tale, told to children to explain away the existence of magic. Let us perform a forensic audit on their most treasured myth, the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. The official timeline reads like a heroic screenplay. 1870 to 1883. 13 years. A baker's dozen of years where men, powered by little more than coal-fired steam and raw muscle, were said to have quarried, shaped, transported, and hoisted over 270,000 tons of granite and limestone. The evidence is not hidden in some secret vault. It is in plain sight, mistaken for decoration, mislabeled as primitive, and ignored by a system of education designed to keep us looking down, not up. The pattern is there, waiting, an echo of a unified global resonance, still humming beneath the noise of our divided world. These structures are everywhere. The same impossible masonry, the same out-of-place classical grandeur, the same technological signature. It's in your country. It's probably in your state. Have you ever walked past a building in your own city, an old post office, a bank, a courthouse, and felt a sense of cognitive dissonance? A feeling that its scale, its style, its sheer permanence does not belong to the humble story of your town's founding? You have seen these fragments. You have felt this echo. Tell us where. Let us piece the map back together, one silent stone at a time. We arrive now at the most difficult part of the investigation, the part that is not about stone and steel, but about the human psyche. It is one thing to audit the impossible logistics of the past, to point a finger at the fallacies in the official record. It is another, far more unsettling thing, to turn the lens upon ourselves and to analyze our own behavior in the aftermath. They supposedly spun more than 14,000 miles of steel wire into cables as thick as ancient trees, all while battling a mysterious Casson disease in the murky depths of the East River. It's a compelling story. It has struggle, sacrifice, and a triumphant climax. The only problem is that the story falls apart under the slightest logistical pressure. We are asked to believe that a civilization whose primary mode of transport was the horse-drawn cart, a society that considered a steam-powered tractor a marvel of modern mechanics, possessed the project management skills, the industrial capacity, and the sheer brute force to execute such a project. Picture the scene they paint for us. Men chipping away at granite blocks with hammers and chisels, loading them onto rickety wooden barges, and then, somehow, hoisting these multi-ton monoliths hundreds of feet into the air with a precision that modern laser-guided cranes would find challenging. They had no centralized electrical grid for power tools, no computer-aided design to model the stresses, no advanced metallurgy to guarantee the uniform quality of every single wire in those colossal cables. The narrative is a logistical paradox. It presents us with an artifact from the 21st century and claims it was built with a toolkit of the 18th. For what happens to a species that awakens amidst the ruins of a palace, with no memory of the kings who built it? They do not see a palace. They see a very elaborate cave. This is the great tragedy of our time, a phenomenon anthropologists have observed in miniature, in isolated pockets of the world, in which they have given a name, the cargo cult. A cargo cult is born from a profound technological mismatch. When a primitive culture encounters a more advanced one, they do not comprehend the science or the industry behind the miracles they witness. They see aircraft as divine chariots, radios as magical talking boxes. And when the advanced culture leaves, the primitives attempt to summon them back through ritual and mimicry. They build effigies of airplanes from wicker and straw. They carve headphones from wood and sit in makeshift control towers, speaking nonsense into bamboo microphones. They perform the motions, they replicate the form, but they have absolutely no understanding of the function. It is a heartbreaking pantomime of forgotten science, a ritualization of ignorance. Now look around you. Look at our world. We have been taught to believe we are the pinnacle of progress, the advanced culture. But what if we are not? What if we are the primitives, left behind in the silent workshop of a far greater civilization? The Casson disease, this mysterious ailment that crippled and killed scores of workers, is presented as a tragic but noble cost of progress. But what if it wasn't an unforeseen consequence of compressed air? What if it was the result of modern, amnesiac humans interacting with the residual energy fields of the structure's true foundation? A foundation they were clearing, not building. The story of their suffering becomes a convenient dramatic element in a narrative of coverage, designed to explain away the high human cost of reactivating, or rather repurposing, a piece of inherited technology they did not understand. And every good fairy tale needs a hero, a singular genius to embody the impossible achievement. For the Brooklyn Bridge, they gave us the Roebling dynasty, John, the visionary father, and Washington, the resilient son. This is a classic trope in the engineering of forgetting. When faced with technology that transcends the era, you don't credit a lost civilization. you invent a lone genius. We are told John A. Roebling conceived of this masterpiece, a design decades, if not centuries, ahead of its time. He appears in the historical record almost fully formed, without the long, documented, and arduous process of trial and error that precedes any genuine technological leap. He simply had the answer, as if the blueprint was not developed, but discovered. The evidence is not in some distant jungle. It is in the very heart of our most celebrated cities. We are a global cargo cult, and these bridges are our most sacred, misunderstood relics. We found these colossal energy machines, these intricate components of a planetary grid, and with the amnesia of a post-cataclysmic race, we repurposed them for the most rudimentary function we could conceive, a simple path over a river. Imagine our ancestors, huddled and confused, crawling out from the mud, looking up at these humming, radiant structures. They would not have understood the principles of etheric resonance or atmospheric energy harvesting. They saw a walkway, and so the great energetic aqueducts of the old world were demoted to the status of a common road for horses and carts, the most profound technological downgrade in known history. Look closer at the details. The proof of our mimicry is etched into their very fabric. Consider the ornate cathedral-like lamps that line these bridges. The Brooklyn Bridge, the Pont Alexandre III in Paris. The official narrative calls them gas or electric lamps, triumphs of a new age. But this is a cover narrative for a pathetic act of retrofitting. These intricate metal housings, often resembling crowns or strange flora, were never designed to hold a fragile filament or a hissing gas flame. Inherited. Then, the story takes an even more theatrical turn. After his father's untimely death, Washington Roebling is tragically crippled by the very caisson disease his project created. And here is the core of the alibi. We are told, with sentimental admiration, that he supervised the remainder of this monumental 13-year construction project from his bedroom window using a telescope. Think about that for a moment. Let the sheer absurdity of the image settle in your mind. The most complex, dangerous, and technically demanding engineering project on the planet at that time, and its chief engineer is not on site. He is not in a planning room. He is not testing materials. He is a distant observer, a spectator to his own legend. Now, ask yourself, honestly, does this sound like a true story of human perseverance? Or does it sound like the perfect, prepackaged explanation for why the chief engineer wasn't actually needed on site? It's a brilliant piece of narrative misdirection. It explains his absence because his presence was unnecessary. The plans were already complete. The components, perhaps, already existed. The assembly was a matter of labor, not of continuous, high-level engineering innovation. Washington Roebling's supposed supervision from afar is not a story of courage. It is a placeholder, an alibi to mask the silent, guiding hand of a pre-existing design. Their complexity, their very form, speaks of a different purpose. They were terminals. Nodes designed to draw energy from the bridge's primary system and transmute it into a stable, brilliant, cold illumination, a plasma light born from the ether itself. When we found them, they were dark. The grid was down. And so, in our ignorance, we did what any cargo cult would do. We hollowed them out. We smashed the delicate inner workings and crudely wired them for our primitive, inefficient incandescent bulbs. We put a candle inside a supercomputer and called it progress. The same mimicry applies to the Titanic stone towers. We are told they are merely structural supports, anchors for the suspension cables. And they do serve that function. But it is a secondary, almost incidental one. Their true purpose was far grander. These were resonant capacitors, tuning forks of granite and limestone designed to vibrate in sympathy with the Earth's natural frequencies, drawing in atmospheric electricity and channeling it into the system. They were the engines, the beating hearts of the machine. And what have we done with them? We hang flags from them. We use them as scenic lookouts. We have turned the power plant into a flagpole. Form without function. Ritual without reason. Every time a city mayor holds a grand ceremony to switch on the lights of a historic bridge, they are unwittingly participating in this cargo cult ritual. It is a story you tell when the real builders are long gone. This pattern repeats itself across the globe, a synchronized chorus of impossible construction and convenient hero worship. For every grand bridge, there is a founder myth. For every inexplicable feat of engineering, there is a tale of a lone visionary who dreamed the impossible. They present us with these fables, these biographical sketches of men who were supposedly demigods of engineering, and they expect us not to notice the vast, gaping holes in the plot. They expect us to applaud the story and never audit the books. They rely on our intellectual passivity. But we are not passive. We see the dissonance. We see the primitive tools set against the cyclopean scale of the work. We see the mathematically impossible timelines. And we see the carefully constructed myth of the lone genius for what it is, a mask, placed over the anonymous face of a far more advanced and forgotten civilization. The official narrative is not just fragile, it is transparent, and once you begin to see through it, you can never look at these silent stone sentinels the same way again. You see them not as monuments to our progress, but as evidence of our profound and collective amnesia. They are the beautiful, haunting crime scene of a stolen history. It is a hollow echo, a pantomime of the true, original event, the act of bringing the bridge online, of activating its connection to the continental power grid. The crowds that gather to watch the spectacle feel a sense of awe, a deep, civic pride. They believe they are celebrating the genius of their forefathers. They are not. They are feeling a ghost, a cellular memory, a faint resonance in their DNA that recognizes the structure for what it once was, a source of life, energy, and light. Their reverence is real, but its object is a memory they are not allowed to consciously access. It is a deep, instinctual respect for a technology they cannot comprehend, a technology their ancestors knew to be vital, even if they could no longer remember why. We live as ignorant tenants in a technological palace. We use the masterfully crafted furniture for firewood, and praise our own ingenuity for creating warmth. We have turned their resonant chambers into echoey tourist attractions, their healing centers into administrative buildings, their power stations into museums. We have ritualized our own amnesia, celebrating our misunderstanding as knowledge. The entire edifice of our modern history is a cargo cult, a desperate attempt to explain the advanced, inherited technology that surrounds us by inventing a lineage of primitive geniuses who somehow, against all logic and evidence, built a world they could not have possibly conceived. We have listened to their stories. We have read their heroic fables of genius and grit, of solitary inventors conjuring miracles from sheer will. We have been told to admire the grainy photographs of men in bowler hats, standing proudly before their creations, and we have been conditioned to accept it as our history. But sentiment is the enemy of truth, and the time for fairy tales is over. Now, we move from the realm of narrative to the cold, unforgiving sanctuary of the ledger. We will conduct a forensic audit of their claims, because history, when it is true, must be able to withstand the scrutiny of basic arithmetic. The numbers, you see, tell a very different story. They do not speak of industrial revolution. They scream of logistical impossibility. Let us take the Eads Bridge in St. Louis, a monument of steel and stone that we are told was willed into existence in 1874. The official record, the one they present to us in textbooks, states it required over 51,000 cubic tons of masonry. Let that number settle in your mind. 51,000 tons. This isn't a building. It's a man-made mountain, carved and assembled with supposed 19th century technology. Let's be generous. Let us grant them their primitive steam engines and their black powder. We are the children wearing our father's lab coat, playing with beakers and tubes, pretending to be scientists. This feeling of loss, this sense of cosmic orphaning, is not an accident. It is a symptom of the dissonance, the disconnect between the world we were told existed and the one we see with our own eyes. If this vision of an amnesiac humanity, of a cargo cult living in the quiet ruins of a forgotten empire, resonates with you on a level you cannot quite explain, make sure you are subscribed. We need awakened minds here. We need those who are ready to stop mimicking the past and start remembering it. We have been shown the crime scene, but not the crime itself. We have examined the evidence, the impossible structures left standing, but we have not yet faced the moment of rupture. The moment the world we see was violently severed from the world that was. We call it history. They called it a reset. It was not a gentle turning of a page. It was an act of brutal, planetary-scale censorship. The event itself was not a flood of water, but of earth, a weaponized frequency perhaps, or a cosmic resonance that shook the very firmament, causing the ground beneath our feet to liquefy. Now, let us follow the journey of a single granite block, a modest 10-ton piece, from quarry to its final resting place in a bridge pier. First, extraction. Without diamond-tipped saws or high-energy explosives, this required hundreds of men drilling holes by hand, hammering wedges, and hoping for a clean break. A process of days, if not weeks, for one block. Now, the transport. The year is 1870. The heavy haul rail network is a fiction yet to be written. The arteries of commerce are mud roads, rutted and unreliable, serviced by horses and wooden carts. A 10-ton block would shatter any wooden wagon. It would sink into any road. It would require a team of dozens of horses, a custom-built sledge, and a cleared path. The logistics of moving this single stone just a few miles would be a monumental engineering project in itself, consuming weeks of labor, immense amounts of food and water for the animals and men, and leaving a trail of broken infrastructure in its wake. And then, the lifting. With rudimentary steam-powered derricks prone to catastrophic failure, this 10-ton block had to be lifted, often hundreds of feet, and set into place with a precision that modern laser-guided cranes would find challenging. It was a targeted cataclysm. It did not shatter the great machines, the bridges, the cathedrals, the star forts. It was far more insidious. It swallowed them. It buried their foundations, their power sources, their true purpose, under a smothering blanket of mud and silt. A great and sudden burial, designed to leave the spires and the arches visible, but their roots, their truth, forever hidden. This was the first stage of the Great Silence. The physical erasure. But a crime of this magnitude requires more than a geological cover-up. It requires a psychological one. The survivors, our ancestors, were left wandering in a world of giants, amnesiacs in their own home. And into this vacuum of memory stepped the architects of the new age, the parasites, the inheritors, those who did not build this world, but claimed it. Their task was not one of creation, but of curation, of control. They needed to explain the inexplicable artifacts their new, primitive society was now using as shelter and transport. And so began the second stage, the forgetting engineering. This was an act of systematic, deliberate de-patterning of the human mind, an archive burning that took place not in a single library, but across the entire collective consciousness. First, they crafted the cover narrative, the Industrial Revolution. The energy expenditure, the sheer physics of it, is staggering. That is the journey of Quantar Block. Now, multiply that logistical nightmare by thousands, 51,000 tons. The official narrative would have us believe that this process was repeated, day after day, in an efficient, assembly line fashion, by a civilization whose primary mode of transport was a tired horse. The numbers do not simply suggest inefficiency. They declare an outright violation of the laws of physics and economics. The energy required, the manpower, the food, the transport infrastructure, it simply did not exist. To claim it did is not history. It is a mathematical absurdity. It is a cover story. But the stone is only half of the equation. The other half is even more damning. The Eads Bridge was the first to use steel on a massive scale. The Brooklyn Bridge, its contemporary, required thousands of miles of high-tensile steel wire for its main cables. This presents us with a profound and unsettling question. Where did it come from? This is the core of the logistical paradox, the gaping chasm in their story. We are shown the final product, the gleaming web of steel, but we are never shown the factory. Because it wasn't there. The production of uniform, high-quality steel in the 1870s was not a matter of a blacksmith in a larger shed. A story of heroic men in stovepipe hats, overcoming impossible odds with grit, steam, and sheer ingenuity. They gave us the myth of the lone genius, the Roeblings, the Eiffels, plucking designs of impossible complexity from thin air. They took the inherited technology of a global, ether-powered civilization and rebranded it as the product of our own recent, primitive struggles. They handed us a forged birth certificate and told us it was our entire family history. Every textbook funded, every university chartered, every museum curated in that era became a weapon in this war on memory. They taught us to see the bridges not as dormant energy conduits, but as quaint relics of a simpler time. They taught us to marvel at the strength of the men who built them, so we would never question the impossible science behind them. But what of those who remembered? What of the lingering echoes in the minds of the survivors? The forgetting engineering had a final, brutal solution for these human anomalies. They built the asylums, rows upon rows of Gothic brick institutions, appearing with the same impossible speed as the bridges themselves. These were not hospitals for the mentally ill. They were prisons for memory. Anyone who spoke of the world before the mud, of cities of light and ships of the air, was not debated. It required an entire industrial ecosystem. It needed vast, deep-shaft coal mines. It needed railways to transport that coal. It needed refineries to turn the coal into coke. It needed iron ore mines and the logistics to move thousands of tons of that ore. It needed colossal blast furnaces operating at precise temperatures, a feat of metallurgy that was, by their own admission, in its absolute infancy. It needed drawing mills of a scale and power that had never existed before, to pull the steel into wire, mile after mile, without a single weak point. It needed a regime of quality control that we would recognize today as modern industrial science. Where was this industrial spine? Where are the records of these vast factory complexes, these legions of metallurgists, these sprawling logistical networks that must exist to support such a project? They are not there. The historical record is silent. We are shown the artifact, the bridge, and told a story about a genius who invented the process in his office. This is like finding a smartphone in an ancient tomb and being told a single scribe carved it from obsidian. The story is a lie because it omits the entire universe of technology required for the object's existence. The bridge is the evidence of a crime, but the absence of the supply chain is the confession. They were diagnosed, labeled insane, and silenced forever behind stone walls. This is the mechanism, a 1-2 punch to the soul of humanity. First, bury the world. Then, bury the truth. They left us the structures, but erased the instruction manuals. They left us the hardware, but rewrote our own mental software to be incompatible with it. They engineered a species to be intellectually and spiritually orphaned, to wander the halls of a palace, believing it to be a cave they built themselves. The silence is their greatest weapon, the very medium of their control matrix, which is why our speech, our questions, our refusal to forget is the most potent form of resistance. Sharing this information is not a passive act. It is a counter-frequency. It is the beginning of the great remembering. Send this to someone who is ready to stop listening to the lies and start reading the evidence etched in stone and steel all around us. And so, we arrive at the final, unavoidable truth. We are not the builders of this world. We are its orphans. Amnesic children, living in the functional ruins of a vast ancestral home. The history they gave us is not a record. It is a cage, its bars forged from a narrative of primitive struggle and slow, painful progress. It is the great silence that betrays the entire narrative matrix. We are auditing a phantom. We are checking the receipts for a ghost economy. The official story asks us to believe that a civilization barely capable of feeding itself, a society where human and animal muscle were the prime movers, could simultaneously quarry, transport, and assemble mountains of stone while also inventing, from scratch, an entire steel industry in secret. It asks us to believe that thousands upon thousands of laborers, working in treacherous conditions with primitive tools, achieved a level of precision and scale that remains awe-inspiring today. Think of the men themselves, an army of them. Where did they sleep? What sanitation did they have? How was the food for thousands procured, transported, and preserved in an age before refrigeration? The logistics of simply keeping the workforce alive would have been a project on par with a major military campaign. Yet these details are glossed over, dismissed as unimportant footnotes to the heroic tale. They are unimportant because they did not happen as described. The workers were not the builders. They were the assemblers, or perhaps merely the excavators, of a technology they did not create. They were the inheritors, just as we are. The numbers are an unyielding witness. They do not bend to ideology or patriotism. Each stone arch that spans our rivers stands as a monument, not to the triumph of the Industrial Revolution, but to the triumph of the great silence that followed it. It is a testament to our cosmic orphaning. a silent reminder that we are a people disinherited from our own past, living in a house we did not build, flicking switches we do not understand. We have been taught to see a power plant and call it a bridge. We are like a lost tribe finding a smartphone in the jungle and using its polished screen as a mirror, utterly blind to the universe of information and power locked inside. We cross these magnificent structures in our metal boxes, oblivious, using a fragment of their intended function, a fraction of their original purpose, celebrating our ability to walk across the surface of a machine we were meant to command. This is the ultimate cognitive dissonance. To accept the official story is to accept that our ancestors, with their horse-drawn carts and their primitive tools, possessed a foresight and an engineering prowess that utterly dwarfs our own, only to have that knowledge vanish from the earth without a trace. The alternative is a truth far more profound and far more disturbing. We are not the pinnacle of civilization. The tonnage of the stone, the tensile strength of the steel, the sheer volume of material moved, all point to a logistical and industrial capacity that is anachronistic by at least a century. The official narrative is not just improbable, it is a mathematical impossibility. It is a story designed to fill a void, to paper over the chasm between the world they found and the world they told us they built. Mathematics doesn't lie. And if you believe you can reconcile these figures, if you can construct a logistical model that allows for horse-drawn carts to move mountains and for phantom factories to produce impossible steel, the ledger is open for your audit. We would all be fascinated to see your work. The logistical vacuum we uncovered is not a localized anomaly. It is not confined to a single ambitious project in St. Louis or New York. To believe that would be to miss the scale of the deception. The impossibility we have audited is not the exception. It is the rule. And this rule was not written in one country, it was written across the entire planet. The moment we zoom out from a single construction site, the carefully constructed narrative of the 19th century does not just crack, it shatters into a million pieces, revealing a pattern so vast, so consistent, that it defies any explanation offered by the history books they gave us. We are the survivors of its collapse, clinging to the wreckage and calling it progress. To question one of these bridges, therefore, is not an act of peddling conspiracy. It is an act of archaeological recovery. It is a forensic examination of our own identity. It is the first step in reclaiming a stolen dignity, in remembering a time when humanity was not a creature of mud and toil, but a custodian of the planet's resonant energies. This is not about old buildings. This is about who we truly are. The purpose of this investigation is not simply to prove a theory, but to break the spell. To learn to see the world not as they tell us it is, but as the evidence shows it to be. The spell of the narrative matrix can be broken, but it requires a conscious act of defiance, a willingness to look at the impossible and ask the forbidden question. The investigation does not stop at the river's edge. The work of remembering has just begun. If you feel the resonance of this truth in your bones, if you are ready to continue excavating our stolen past with us, then subscribe to this channel. Activate the signal. Welcome to the resistance. It exposes the phantom limb of a global empire. Prepare for a disorienting journey, a form of geographical vertigo. We are told that the nascent industrial nations of the late 1800s were fierce competitors, each forging its own path, each jealously guarding its own engineering secrets. This is a foundational pillar of the modern world's origin story. Yet the evidence on the ground tells a different story. Let us travel, in the blink of an eye, to the remote Massif central of France. There, spanning the Truyère Gorge, stands the Garabit Viaduct. Completed, we are told, in 1884, its spiderweb of wrought iron, its majestic parabolic arch, is attributed to the genius of Gustave Eiffel, a triumph of French engineering. Now, jump southwest, across the Pyrenees to Portugal. There, over the Douro River in Porto, stands the Maria Pia Bridge. It is a near-perfect twin of Garabit, a mirror image of design and function. The official date? 1877, also attributed to Eiffel. Two nations, two identical, revolutionary designs. A remarkable coincidence, perhaps. But the echo doesn't stop. Let us cross the Atlantic in an instant. We arrive in rural Pennsylvania, at the Kanzua Viaduct. When built in 1882, it was the highest and longest railroad bridge in the world. Its forest of slender, latticed iron towers, its rhythmic, almost digital precision, it speaks the exact same architectural language.